Stewie is a former dictator. He talks like he just got back from colonizing half of Asia, which is weird considering he's supposed to be 1 year old and living in Rhode Island. The theory goes that Stewie's genius-level intelligence and inexplicably British accent aren't just random quirks. They're leftover memories from a past life where he ruled nations with an iron fist. Think about it. This baby has built time machines, weather control devices, and enough weapons to supply a small military. That's not normal toddler behavior. Most 1-year-olds are excited about stacking blocks. Stewie's excited about world domination and occasionally matricide. The reincarnation angle actually explains why he's so obsessed with killing Lois. Maybe in his past life, she was the revolutionary who overthrew his regime. Or maybe he just has unresolved mommy issues that transcend lifetimes. Either way, it's deeply concerning. His British accent is the real giveaway, though. Nobody else in his family sounds like that. Peter sounds like he gargles gravel, Lois sounds generically American, and Meg sounds like depression had a voice. But Stewie? He sounds like he's one monocle away from attending Parliament, Peter's heightened reality after his family's death. Here's where things get genuinely dark. This theory suggests Peter Griffin is actually living in a delusion after Lois, Meg, and Chris died in some tragic accident. Everything we see is just his broken mind's way of coping with unbearable loss. It would explain why the show gets progressively more absurd and detached from reality. Peter's not just getting dumber over time. His grip on what's real is slipping. The cutaway gags. Those are his brain desperately trying to fill the silence where his family's voices used to be. This theory points to how Peter can survive literally anything. He's been hit by cars, blown up, shot, and once fought a giant chicken for what felt like 17 hours. Normal humans don't bounce back from that. But a man trapped in his own grief-soaked fantasy, he can't die because he's already living in the worst possible reality. The saddest part is thinking about Stewie and Brian in this context. Maybe they're the only real ones left, watching Peter slowly lose his mind while pretending everything's fine. Or maybe they're part of the delusion too, and Peter's just completely alone, talking to empty rooms. The Griffins are in purgatory or hell. Speaking of dark interpretations, let's talk about the possibility that the entire Griffin family is dead and stuck in some kind of eternal punishment realm. It honestly makes more sense than it should. Their lives are a constant cycle of chaos, pain, and reset buttons. Nothing ever truly changes. Peter never grows as a person. Meg suffers endlessly without relief. Chris remains perpetually confused. Lois's resentment builds but never reaches a breaking point. That's not life. That's a loop. Quahog itself feels less like a real town and more like a cosmic joke. The same locations, the same people, the same conflicts over and over. It's like someone designed a sitcom version of Sisyphus pushing his boulder up a hill, except the boulder is Peter's idiocy and the hill is basic human decency. The fact that they can't die no matter how fatal the situation supports this. They're already dead. You can't kill what's already been judged and sentenced. The giant chicken fights aren't just running gags, they're eternal punishments disguised as cartoon violence. Brian's brain was put in a dog's body. Sure, he walks on 4 legs sometimes, but this dude drinks martinis, writes novels, dates human women, and has opinions about philosophy that would make college freshmen nod pretentiously. That's not normal dog behavior. The theory suggests that Brian's situation is identical to Klaus from American Dad, a human consciousness trapped in an animal body through some scientific experiment gone wrong. It explains everything. The drinking problem? That's a human trying to cope with body dysmorphia on a species level. His pretentiousness makes more sense too. He's not a dog pretending to be intellectual. He's a human stuck in a dog's body desperately trying to maintain his identity. Every time someone treats him like a pet, it's a reminder of what he's lost. The really messed up part is that nobody seems to care or question it. Peter knows Brian can talk, think, and function like a human, but still makes him sleep in a dog bed and occasionally puts him on a leash. That's either extreme denial or everyone's in on whatever experiment created Brian in the first place. Hey, by the way, I'm posting pretty consistently here, so it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and drop a like for the algorithm. Brian is the one writing Family Guy. The show's entire reality is filtered through his alcoholic, self-important lens, which explains why he's portrayed as the most reasonable member of the family, despite being a barely functioning mess. This theory suggests Brian sits at his typewriter, downing scotch, and writing exaggerated versions of his life. Peter's not really that stupid. Brian just writes him that way because it makes Brian look smarter by comparison. Meg's not really that unpopular, Brian just doesn't pay attention to her, so she barely exists on the page. The cutaway gags are Brian losing focus and daydreaming mid-sentence. The fourth wall breaks are him getting too self-aware of his own writing. The celebrity appearances are his fantasies about being famous enough to hang with Hollywood elite. It explains why the show has no consistent continuity. Brian's just making it up as he goes, drunk enough that he forgets what he wrote yesterday. One episode, Quagmire hates him. Next episode, they're civil. Then back to hatred. That's not character development, that's a writer who can't keep his own story straight. Family Guy exists inside the American Dad universe. Seth MacFarlane basically confirmed that all his shows exist in the same multiverse, but this theory takes it further. Family Guy isn't real within its own universe. It's a fictional TV show that the American Dad characters watch. Stan Smith has referenced Family Guy multiple times. There's been crossovers. But what if those crossovers are just the American Dad characters meeting actors? Every time we see the Griffins, we're watching a show within a show, like some kind of animated inception that nobody asked for. It would explain why Family Guy can be so much more absurd than American Dad. One show has to follow some rules of reality because it's real in that universe. The other can do whatever it wants because it's just a cartoon within a cartoon. Meta doesn't even begin to cover it. The Simpsons probably exist as a show in the American Dad universe too, which means there's a hierarchy of reality here. American Dad at the top, then Family Guy, then The Simpsons, and somewhere at the bottom is probably Cleveland Show, which everyone's forgotten about anyway. Meg is Stewie's biological mother. What if Meg got pregnant as a young teenager and Lois and Peter agreed to raise the baby as their own to avoid scandal? That baby was Stewie, which means Meg is technically his mother, not his sister. It explains why Meg is treated so horribly by the family. They resent her for the burden she created. Peter especially treats her with contempt because she ruined the family's image. Lois is bitter about having to raise another child that isn't even hers. Stewie's obsession with killing Lois makes more sense too. Maybe on some subconscious level, he knows Lois isn't his real mother. His genius brain has pieced together the truth, but his baby vocabulary can't articulate it, so it comes out as murderous rage. Brian might be the father, which is why he and Stewie have such a strong bond. Brian had access to the house, was around teenage Meg, and definitely has shown questionable judgment about age-appropriate relationships. It's gross, but it tracks with his character. Mr. Burns is Stewie grown-up. Crossover theories are usually garbage, but this one has some merit. Mr. Burns from The Simpsons and Stewie Griffin share too many characteristics to ignore. Both are wealthy, both are evil, both are oddly British despite American settings, and both have that same skeletal, decrepit energy. The theory goes that after failing at world domination as a baby, Stewie eventually pivots to corporate domination. He builds a nuclear empire, becomes impossibly old through his own experiments, and ends up in Springfield living out his final centuries as Montgomery Burns. His relationship with Smithers mirrors his relationship with Brian. Both are dependent on a loyal companion who handles the daily logistics while the mastermind schemes. Both are simultaneously annoyed by and reliant on their sidekick. The timeline doesn't work, but when has timeline consistency ever mattered in animated shows? If Stewie's messing with time travel constantly, he could easily end up in the past becoming his own future self. Time is a flat circle, and that circle is shaped like Homer Simpson's head. Cleveland Jr. is Peter's biological son. Cleveland Jr. went from being a hyperactive skinny kid to being a slow, overweight teenager who acts and looks suspiciously like Peter Griffin. The theory is that Loretta had an affair with Peter, and Cleveland Jr. is actually Peter's biological son. Look at the evidence. Cleveland Jr. has Peter's body type, his slow way of speaking, and his general confusion about how the world works. He's basically Peter Griffin in a different color scheme. Meanwhile, Cleveland is thin and soft-spoken. Genetically, nothing about him screams father of Cleveland Jr. Loretta and Peter definitely had the opportunity. They all hung out constantly. Peter's been shown to make incredibly poor decisions, especially when drunk. Loretta was clearly unhappy in her marriage. The affair practically writes itself. Cleveland might not even know. He's too nice, too trusting to question it. Or maybe he does know, and that's why there's sometimes tension between him and Peter that goes beyond normal friend stuff. Either way, Cleveland Jr. is Peter's son, and nobody wants to admit it. Post-cancellation Family Guy is a different universe. Family Guy got canceled in 2002 and came back in 2005. The theory is that the show that returned isn't the same show. It's an alternate timeline version where everything's darker, meaner, and more cynical. Pre-cancellation, Family Guy had heart. Characters learned lessons sometimes. There were genuine emotional moments. Post-cancellation Family Guy treats its characters like punching bags in an abusive relationship with comedy. Meg went from awkward to tortured. Peter went from lovable idiot to actual sociopath. The cutaways became more frequent and less connected to reality. It's like the new universe has looser rules about what's possible. Pre-cancellation. Peter couldn't fight a chicken for 10 minutes straight. Post-cancellation. Peter can do literally anything because physics stopped mattering. The animation style changed too, got sharper and less warm. It's a visual representation of the tonal shift. The old universe died when Fox canceled it, and what came back was a mirror universe version where everything's slightly wrong and nobody addresses it. Brian and Stewie's time travel changed the show that they've definitely broken something fundamental about their reality. Every time they jump through time, they create branching timelines, and at some point they jumped back to the wrong one. Remember when Brian died and then came back? That shouldn't have been possible without time travel intervention. Stewie literally rewrote reality to undo Brian's death, which means everything after that episode exists in a timeline that shouldn't exist. The continuity errors aren't mistakes. They're evidence of timeline corruption. Characters remember things that didn't happen in this version of events. Relationships reset because they're pulling memories from different timelines. The show's reality is basically held together with duct tape and Stewie's science. Every time they time travel, they risk erasing themselves or creating a paradox, but they keep doing it anyway because consequences don't stick. They've probably destroyed and recreated their universe dozens of times and just don't remember because memory doesn't survive timeline rewrites. There's a chemical in quahog water. It's the only logical explanation for why an entire town operates like a shared hallucination. The cutaway gags aren't just narrative devices, they're literally everyone experiencing chemical-induced flashbacks simultaneously. Think about everyone in Quahog, Peter's brain damage level stupidity, Quagmire's sex addiction that borders on criminal, Joe's refusal to acknowledge that he's paralyzed shouldn't stop him from doing certain activities. Herbert's whole deal, these aren't character quirks, these are symptoms of environmental poisoning. The chemical explains why everyone just accepts the insanity as normal. Your neighbor shouldn't be able to fight a giant chicken through half the city without someone calling the National Guard, but in Quahog, everyone just watches and continues their day because their perception of reality is fundamentally altered. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe it's a government experiment to see what happens when you poison an entire town's water supply with hallucinogens. Quahog isn't a town, it's a testing ground, and the Griffins are just lab rats who don't know they're being observed. Peter's welfare fraud, he's been fired from his job dozens of times, destroyed property worth millions, and shown zero financial responsibility. Yet somehow the family never faces real consequences. The theory is that Peter's been committing massive welfare fraud and has secretly accumulated enough wealth to basically own Quahog. It explains why Peter never goes to jail despite committing countless crimes. He owns the police. It explains why the Griffin's house gets destroyed and rebuilt constantly. Peter owns the construction companies. Every business in Quahog is secretly funded by Peter's illegal empire. He plays the idiot as a cover. Nobody suspects the stupid guy of being a criminal mastermind. While everyone underestimates him, Peter's been running the town like his personal playground. The welfare checks are just one income stream. He's probably got dozens of scams running simultaneously. The real genius is that even his family doesn't know. Lois thinks they're surviving on Peter's brewery paycheck and her occasional piano teaching. In reality, they're millionaires living like middle-class people because Peter's hiding his empire to avoid suspicion. Lois secretly gets money from her father. Or maybe Peter's not the financial genius. Maybe Lois has been bankrolling their entire life with secret payments from her rich father, Carter Pewterschmidt. It explains how they afford everything, despite Peter's constant unemployment and destruction. Carter clearly has unlimited money and cares about Lois enough to keep her comfortable, even if he disapproves of Peter. What better way to ensure his daughter's safety than to quietly fund her life without letting Peter know? That way Lois has security while Peter maintains his pride, thinking he's providing for his family. Every time Peter destroys something expensive, Carter writes another check. The house renovations, Carter's money. The car replacements, Carter's money. Their ability to afford food despite Peter eating enough for 3 people, definitely Carter's money. Lois probably has access to a secret bank account that she uses for emergencies, which in Griffin terms means every other week. She can't tell Peter because his ego couldn't handle knowing he's been living off his father-in-law's charity for years, so she maintains the lie while quietly ensuring her family doesn't end up homeless. Stan Smith is related to Quagmire. They have the same voice actor, the same ridiculous chin, and similar personality traits when it comes to their occupations defining their entire identity. The theory is they're related, maybe cousins or half-brothers who don't know about each other. The chin is genetic, that's not a normal human chin, that's a family trait that screams shared DNA. Add in the fact that both are absurdly dedicated to their jobs to the point of insanity, and you've got a pattern. Stan serves America to a psychotic degree. Quagmire serves his own libido to a criminal degree. Same energy, different application. Their fathers could have been brothers. Both families seem to have secrets and weird backgrounds. Stan's father was Jack Smith, who had his own issues. Quagmire's family is barely mentioned, which in TV terms means there's definitely something being hidden. If they ever found out they were related, they'd either immediately hate each other or team up to become the most dangerous duo in the Seth MacFarlane universe. Either way, that chin is too distinctive to be coincidence. They share DNA, and somewhere there's a family tree that connects Langley Falls to Quahog. Joe Swanson was the Tick, voiced by Patrick Warburton, who also voiced the Tick. The theory is that Joe didn't lose the use of his legs in a random police incident. He lost them fighting crime as a superhero, and that superhero was the Tick. Think about Joe's physique. The man is absurdly muscular for someone who can't do leg workouts. That's not normal wheelchair user body development. That's superhero body maintenance. He's keeping himself in peak physical condition like he's expecting to return to active duty as a crime fighter. His police work is almost too good sometimes. He's taken down criminals single-handedly from his wheelchair using skills that seem beyond normal cop training. That's because he's not just a cop. He's a former superhero who's still got the reflexes and tactical knowledge from his previous life. The Tick was invulnerable except for his mind being a bit scrambled. Joe acts completely normal mentally, which means the transition from Tick to Joe was probably traumatic enough to snap him into sanity while simultaneously destroying his ability to walk. He traded superhero invincibility for normal human consciousness and got paralyzed in the process. Da Boom episode is canon. The Y2K episode where the world ends and the Griffin survive the apocalypse might actually be canon. Everything since then has been the family living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, but their brains have created an elaborate shared delusion that life continued normally. It explains the increased chaos and decreased consequences. They're not living in real society anymore. They're living in the ruins of society while hallucinating that Quahog still exists. Every person they interact with is either another survivor, playing along with the delusion, or a complete figment of their imagination. The episode ended with them settling in a mutated world, but what if their minds couldn't handle that reality? What if they immediately retreated into fantasy, and everything we've watched since is that fantasy? The real Quahog was destroyed. The real world ended. They're just in denial. Randy Newman appearing as a mutant in that episode should have been the clue. Reality broke, and instead of accepting it, the Griffins chose to pretend nothing happened. Every episode since has been them sitting in rubble, starving and delusional, acting out their old lives like nothing changed. We see the world through Stewie's eyes, which explains why reality is so warped. We're seeing the world through a baby's distorted perception where everything is exaggerated, nothing makes sense, and the rules of physics are based on infant understanding. To Stewie, Peter is a giant stupid monster because that's how a baby perceives an adult man who takes up all the space and makes loud noises. Lois is an all-powerful being who controls everything, which is why Stewie's obsessed with defeating her. Meg barely exists because babies don't really notice older siblings. The cutaways are Stewie's imagination wandering. His baby brain can't stay focused on one thing. So the narrative constantly jumps to random thoughts and memories that have nothing to do with what's happening. Adults do this too, but Stewie's baby brain does it every 30 seconds. Brian is the only one who seems normal because he's Stewie's primary caretaker and companion. Babies form strong attachments to whoever feeds them and changes them. And Stewie's attachment to Brian has elevated him to main character status in Stewie's perception of reality. Lois is leaving Peter. Over the seasons, Lois has gotten progressively more unstable, more violent, and more openly resentful of Peter. This is incel character development. This is a woman on the edge of finally leaving. The show is documenting the slow-motion collapse of a marriage. She's had affairs. She's snapped and become abusive. She's openly mocked Peter in front of others. These are the actions of someone who's already checked out emotionally, but hasn't pulled the trigger on divorce yet. Maybe she's waiting for the kids to be older. Maybe she's waiting for enough money. But she's waiting. Her piano playing has become less about passion and more about escape. Every time she plays, it's her mentally leaving the house, fantasizing about a life where she's not married to an overgrown man-child who destroys everything he touches. The theory suggests the show will eventually end with Lois leaving, and that's why everything feels increasingly unhinged. We're watching the final days of the Griffin family as a unit. Peter's getting worse because he subconsciously knows she's slipping away. Lois is getting more reckless because she's already made the decision in her heart. Stewie de-aged everyone. Chris and Meg are perpetually teenagers. Stewie remains a baby forever. Peter and Lois never get older. Time passes, they reference current events, but nobody ages. The theory is that Stewie created a de-aging device and trapped everyone in a time loop where they can't grow older. He did it because he's terrified of growing up. As long as he's a baby, he can maintain his genius without the responsibility of being an adult. He can keep building death rays without anyone questioning why an adult is acting so immaturely. He's frozen himself and everyone around him in time. Nobody remembers being de-aged because Stewie also erased their memories of aging. To them, time moves normally, but objectively, they've been the same age for decades. Chris should be in his 30s by now. Meg should be a full adult. But they're stuck, and Stewie's the reason why. The only one who ages is Brian, and that's because he wasn't part of the original de-aging. He's watching his family stay the same while he gets older, which is why he's so depressed and drinks so much. He knows something's wrong but can't prove it, so he medicates the existential horror with alcohol and pretension. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so please subscribe, and thanks for watching.